Welcome back. So we can now say Nigeria now has service chiefs because the appointments have now been confirmed. The confirmation followed the screening of the Senate committee, which was presided over by the Senate President Godswill Akpabio. Now, the service chiefs who were confirmed are Major General Christopher Musa, who is the Chief of Defense Staff, Major General Taoreed Lagbaja as Chief of Army Staff, Rear Admiral Emmanuel Ikechukwu Ogala as Chief of Naval Staff now, and Air Vice Marshal Hassan Bala Abubakar as Chief of the Air Staff. Now, on June the 19th, 2023, exactly 3 weeks after his inauguration, President Tinubu made sweeping changes to the defense forces, forcing out the security chiefs and the head of police less than a month after taking office. In his inaugural speech on May 29, President Tinubu had made security one of his key priorities and promised reforms in the sector, including the recruitment of more soldiers and police officers while paying and equipping them better. Nigeria has for the longest time been plagued by multifaceted insecurity challenges, with long-running fighting against rebel groups as well as banditry and kidnapping for ransom that have spread to most parts of the country. Now, many believe that the change of service chiefs now is a good starting point to re-engineer the nation's security architecture ahead of the daunting task. Security expert and managing director of Beacon Consulting Limited, Kabir Adamu, now joins us from Abuja. Dr. Adamu, thank you very much for coming on the program. Well, the service chiefs have now been confirmed. We expected that was going to happen. There was just no way. I mean, we've never had a situation where service confirmation was declined anyway. So they have now been confirmed. And what do you expect of them now going forward?
Thank you, DEJI, and it's my delight to be back on your platform after a little hiatus. The mandate of the military in Nigeria is very clear. If we look at Section 217 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, it provides the mandate of the military, and there are basically three things. And if you allow me to quickly just mention them,
go ahead.
It would be, of course, the establishment of the three forces is contained in the Constitution. I think that's where we should start. And then, as a country, we're required, subject to an act of the National Assembly, to equip and maintain an armed forces. So I think that's absolutely important. Now, their responsibility is more or less fourfold. One is defending Nigeria from external integration. Two is maintaining its territorial integrity and securing its borders from violation on land, sea, or air. Three is suppressing insurrection and acting in aid of civil authorities to restore order when called upon to do so by the president, but subject to conditions that may be prescribed by an act of the National Assembly. And then lastly, which is the controversial one, performance of such other functions as may be prescribed by an act of the National Assembly. Now, the service, and then of course the number three, is that the composition of officer corps or other ranks of the armed forces of the Federation shall reflect the federal character of Nigeria. So this is what the Constitution, Section 217, provides for the armed forces. And when the four service chiefs went to the National Assembly yesterday, I'm hoping that in the closed session that they did, this is what the National Assembly attempted to ensure that we see over the next few months, years, that the service chiefs will superintend over the military. Having said that, there are certain things that, based on our research, we've been able to identify. There is a decline within the Nigerian military. And those declines I have captured into two major areas. Number one is the legacy of the military rule. That legacy has created a situation where the military itself is a little bit beyond the control of the civilian administration, as it were. There has been progress, but sadly that legacy is still living with us today. Number two is the role of the military under democracy. And I would, in a short form, capture it as failed promises. And for the simple reason that we've given the military responsibilities that are a little bit varied. And in discussing this, we can look at the Obasanjo years, we can look at the Yar'Adua and Jonathan years, and then of course the Buhari Yes. Time would not allow me to go into details, but one thing that I can summarize to say that the military has grown from what it used to be in the Fourth Republic to what it is at the moment. But there are certain distress that remain within the military, and I'll quickly mention the distress. Number one, the problems of leadership and civilian oversight. Number two, funding constraints. Number three, corruption and lack of accountability. Number four, equipment and logistics deficit. Number five, personnel and training gaps. And then number six is poor civil-military relations. And then, of course, the last one is poor welfare conditions. Now, it's very important that we set this foundation because this is what the service chiefs have inherited. There have been tremendous progress towards solving this distress, but a lot of them still remain institutionally and structurally. So in the engagement that the National Assembly did, given the custodian of our laws and the fact that the two major components of legislation would be at their disposal, and I mean budgeting, and then of course the legislation itself. So I'm hoping that in their engagement, they would have discussed how the service chiefs hope to address this distress and the legacy that I talked about earlier on. So that at the end of the day, what we will have would be a military that is functional, that is able to meet this mandate that I read out earlier on. And in doing this, what I have tried to do is to set out what I would call priorities for reform, which is what I hope when eventually the National Assembly names the leadership of the committees that would have responsibility for the military, they would look at. Now, number one is to strengthen leadership and oversight. That's improve the capacity for leadership and oversight of the military, establishment, as it were. Improve and sustain funding of the military. Number three, improve staffing and training arrangement. Number four, rectify equipment deficit. And then number five, curb corruption, improve accountability, and promote transparency. Number six, improve military-civil relations. And then, of course, the last one, support from our international partners. So this is the kind of, I would say, agenda that I'm hoping the National Assembly would have set during the engagement, and then, of course, more importantly, for the service chiefs after confinement.
Okay. I get your point now, but let's talk about some of the existential problems that security challenges now that we're dealing with. The issue of, for instance, the insurgency in the northeast of the country, even though to a large extent that has gone down, but it's still there. And now you have, two of the service chiefs. I'm talking about the Chief of Defense Staff and, of course, the Chief of Army Staff. Both of them were at one point in time head of the counterinsurgency operation. So I'm just wondering, what do you expect to see from them? I mean, what new direction now do you expect to see from them in our counterinsurgency operation?
So it's absolutely important that I mention at this stage that I see the role of the military slightly different from what your everyday commentator or expert or academician would provide. I see the military as a component of our national security strategy. I don't see them as being responsible or even in the lead or in the forefront of the implementation of our national security strategy. If time would have allowed us, I would have showed you how there are about 29 ministries, departments, and agencies that are responsible for security within the country, and the military is only 4 out of that 29. So no matter the type of arithmetic and maths that you use, 4 out of 29 is not a majority, neither is it dominant. Is it right to say because of their possession of superior weaponry that they are more appropriate for national security? Certainly no. The reason why our forefathers, those who conceived of our constitution, made it the responsibility of the police to drive internal security is exactly because of that. Now, having said that, to answer your question directly, our counter-terrorism strategy provides for the role of all of these 29 ministries, departments, and agencies. So the military have their own role to play in the case of the Northeast, where we do have an ongoing warfare and where you have an ongoing operation called Operation Hadinkai, the role of the military is very clear. And to summarize that role, it is to suppress the activities of those that are challenging the supremacy of the use of force by the state, in conjunction with the other security agencies. It is not for them to do it alone. And so what I am hoping, the type of narrative I'm hoping to hear from especially the two persons that you mentioned, the Chief of Defense Staff and the Chief of Army Staff, as well as the Chief of Air Staff, is this narrative. And the good thing is that the foundation for that has been handed over to them by the immediate past service chiefs, who recognize that the military is contributing to national security and is not the only agency responsible for national security. So I'm hoping they see that and build upon it, so that their role, first off, they are overwhelmed because, like we've agreed, they are short-staffed. The number of personnel is not enough for the responsibility that we're giving to them. So the best way to counter that is to work in unison with the other organizations. And the good thing is that the president has stated clearly that he wants collaboration. He's also talked about coordination. He's also talked about cooperation. The second thing is the force multipliers. We don't talk enough about the role of technology. We don't talk enough about the role, improved communication. I hate to say this is a public forum, but for the purposes of what we're doing, it is unacceptable that to date, our military is still using the GSM to communicate within itself. The GSM is vulnerable, and we've seen severally in the past instances where that vulnerability has cost us dearly. So force multipliers, including communication, and several other components of force multipliers that I don't want to talk about here for obvious purposes, are things that I would say these individuals should look into as speedily as possible, so that their desire, and I'm happy that I had them talking about that, of having a functional light force military capability that is adequate for the current threat that Nigeria faces will be achieved.
You did talk about the police and that it should play a central role now in internal security. Now, the new head of the police said that much, and that the police, that we're going to see a new police force going forward, a police force that will, of course, lead in terms of internal security. If you were to set the agenda now for the new leadership of the police, what would that be?
So just to quickly mention this, the immediate past administration, that of President Buhari, did launch a police reform committee. I think, I can't recall the exact acronym, but it's called PORTO, I think PORTO. And what that task force or committee did is to work together with the police itself, with the Police Service Commission, with our international development partners, and then come up with a roadmap for the implementation of a reform agenda. You recall, after the EndSARS protest, every Nigerian, in fact, the whole international committee and everyone who was interested in Nigeria spoke, exceedingly regarding the need for police reform. So that administration went about working, and just before the administration handed over to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the roadmap was launched. It's very important, I think, that the Acting Inspector General of Police take cognizance of that roadmap, because he doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. That document, I've seen it, is well rehearsed, well researched, and it provides the template for the type of policing that we desire in Nigeria, policing that recognizes the rights of the Nigerian, that also puts forward the welfare of the policeman himself, that recognizes the need for improved equipment, that recognizes the need for better relationship between the Nigerian police and citizens. So if he does follow that roadmap, I'm hoping that we would see an improvement in that regard. And some of the areas that I'm hoping he would need to look at speedily would be the implementation of the community policing paradigm. A lot has been done in that regard by the immediate past administration. Community policing committees have been established in almost all the 774 local governments. Constabularies have been recruited in all the locations. What the challenge has been the payment for these positions. I think when the idea was conceived, they did not imagine that they would have to pay them. But somewhere along the road, politicians, I think, did what they would usually do. And then now we woke up with the realization that promises were made, and that promise include payment. Unfortunately, there was no provision for that within the budget. So he is inheriting that, and he will have to address that, working together with the Minister of Police Affairs when he's eventually appointed, with the Police Service Commission too, so that they address that issue immediately. Another thing is the directive that the former president did, and which has left with him a legacy for the employment of 10,000 police personnel every year. Unfortunately, most of these persons have been employed, but there were some, you remember a legal dispute between the Office of the Inspector General of Police and the chairman of the Police Service Commission.
Yes.
That has now left, I think, almost 20,000 of these recruited personnel hanging somewhere. They've been recruited. A lot of them are not getting paid because of this legal dispute. So you need to address that as speedily as possible. And then, of course, the other components would be some of the issues that have come up. We do release a report monthly, and one thing that we highlight consistently is extrajudicial killing or justice by the security sector, including the police. Almost every month we see cases where, unfortunately, instances where the police abuse the rights of Nigerians. Now he needs to look at that closely so that he can improve the relationship between the police and citizens. The idea of improved intelligence, which he needs, can only be achieved if he gets the buy-in of the Nigerian citizenry. And I want to emphasize that is one of the agenda of the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration. If you pick up the Renewed Hope manifesto, it is stated clearly there in the security imperatives that he intends to win the hearts and minds of the people. And the police can help him in achieving that if they improve the relationship, the trust deficit that currently exists between them and Nigerians.
Let me ask you this last question before I let you go. You know what is happening in the southeast of the country. I mean, you must have seen the leadership, various leaders now of the southeast, where they met with the president and they're asking him to, do something, at least probably do something about the security of the southeast of the country. It's not as if the government isn't doing anything, but they just want to see more action now from the federal government. I mean, you look at the southeast, you look at the security situation there. You tend to get the impression that the problem is intractable. I mean, I'm talking about the security challenge now. You get that impression that it is intractable. What do you think we're not doing right in the southeast? I mean, our security agencies now. And what do you think needs to change so that we can begin to see concrete results on the ground? I mean, the people are really, really suffering in terms of security.
I agree with you totally. A non-state actor that has been outlawed in Nigeria, unfortunately, is implementing an economic warfare against first of its people, and then by extension, the Nigerian state. And I must say, with all sense of responsibility, that it is succeeding. And we need to put a stop to that. And there are 4 approaches. It can never be one approach. And I think that is what the failure has been over time. We need to come together as a country, recognize that our security, our national security, is a function of our national powers. Now, this statement is a very, huge statement. It's what is pregnant. I can spend the next one hour talking about what I mean by our national security is a reflection of our national powers. But for the purposes of our conversation, I will reduce it to 4 things. We must, as a matter of priority, implement these 4 things. Number 1 is the diplomatic or political measures. That political measure require engagement. It would have a diplomatic component. Some actors that are inciting the movement are based in countries that we have diplomatic relationships with. So we must, while using the political component, and that means engagement with all the stakeholders. If I'm asked to handle this, the first thing I'll do is to conduct a stakeholder mapping. Everyone who has a say in this matter, whether he's internal or he's external, identify him, start engagement, and then, of course, bring in diplomatic moves so that the external component, most of the countries where these external components are, we've got friendly relationships with them. They've got their ambassadors here, we've got our own ambassadors there. Even where this doesn't exist, our intelligence capabilities have backdoor channels to reach out to these components. And that means so when I say national powers, this is an example of what I mean. There are several agencies of government, and in fact, some of them non-governmental, that we have to bring in to achieve this political and diplomatic component. So that's number one. And the second one is the security component, and that is very obvious. We need to ensure that the administration of criminal justice system is strengthened within the Southeast. Offenders, irrespective of their identity, irrespective of their color, irrespective of their background, whenever they offend, they are arrested, and then they are subjected to our criminal justice system. The third one is the social component. A lot of what is happening in the Southeast is driven by this idea of marginalization. The Southeast believes it's marginalized, and some of it is real, others are perceived. So we need to address that. And thirdly, the economic warfare by this group is adding to that perception of marginalization. So we must also, address that. And then the last one is the community approach. These persons are not ghosts. They are from within that community. So we have to find a way to make them understand that one of the worst things that you can ever do is to be injurious to your own community. You cannot be injurious to your own community. And the moment they understand that, and then we are able to get the buy-in of the community itself, if that community rises as one, they will be able to limit their ability to operate. Again, it cannot be one approach. It's about 4 approaches, and we need to do those approaches jointly. We can't be implementing one while we're not implementing the other. The last one, I mentioned before, is the legal approach. The state arrested the leader of that group. The state used the judicial system to outlaw the group. Now, at a point, the leader of that group was granted bail. We are told that the state went back to the courts and got an injunction for a stay of execution on that bail injunction. Now, there is a lot of uncertainty regarding all of this. So I think this new administration will need to get legal advice. What is the true position of that case? And ask itself, if the Ministry of Justice is not able to prosecute him on the basis of, on the grounds of what he's being charged with. Because I know, based on my interaction with the Nigerian, especially ministries, departments, and agencies, sometimes we bungle our cases even before we go to court. And the only reason why this case will be running for up to now is perhaps we bungle it at some point. But I am an advocate of the rule of law. If we've not gathered evidence to be able to prosecute him, then we should free him, but with a proviso. When we free him, remember I talked about several other measures. Those measures must be implemented to ensure he stops being a threat to the Nigerian state, with conditions attached to that. But we cannot continuously hold him without prosecuting him. That, for me, is a recipe for the kind of situation that we have at the moment. Either we prosecute him on the basis of the evidences we have, the charges against him, or we release him, of course, with conditions when he's released.
I thought you were going to talk about the military approach, or there should be none.
I talked about the security approach, and remember earlier on, I did speak about that I am different in my approach to security. The military is just one out of the security organizations that we have. So when I say security, the military is also involved in that security. But on no grounds, I don't see them playing a frontline role in the Southeast. No, the other security agencies, especially the intelligence component, together with the police, I think have a greater role to play than the military. In my deployment of security, it's concentric. The concentric cycles that will be deployed will be determined by the threat we're facing. Now, given the threat I have seen and I have studied, I have researched, anyone who is interested should visit my website. You will see the reports that we've released. So you get a sense that we have studied this problem. The threat is not one that requires military approach. Security approach is required, but that concentric cycle should have the military in the background and not in the forefront.
Dr. Kabir Adamo, CEO and Managing Director, of course, of Beacon Consulting Limited, a security outfit now based in Abuja. Thank you very much for coming on the program, and thank you for your deep insights.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so very much. All right, we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Don't go away.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.